It's Reiki, but not as you know it.
Well,
Hello there, Linda.
hello.
My goodness, it's very fragrant in here today.
Yes, and I hope it's not attached to me, but you never know. You never know. I seem to have, there's something in here, and I'm not quite sure what it is.
Oda, oh my.
And I was hoping it would just dissipate, but it's sticking to everything.
It's like a miasma.
Yes.
Then Victorians would be building sewer systems all around us to quench that miasma. That is an extraordinarily
Yes, I know where you're going with that.
Yeah,
I see you're looking at my cocktail, and Cornelia has not stopped laughing. I'm not sure. It's really not very attractive in color either. It's black and white separated. Like, I don't know what I should do with it. I don't know if it should be mixed. I'm afraid if I mix it, it's going to turn brown. I don't know, but she tells me it's called pungent potion. And
that sounds like a breed of dog.
It smells like dog and something else that is pretty odoriferous, but I'm not sure.
Skunk.
Ew, yes. I think you might be right.
I love the smell of skunk. I love it. I don't know.
And you're wired very weird.
Very different. I wonder if I should have been a perfumery, because like my sense of smell is strange. Like I can smell some things that people find utterly revolting and just really love the smell of it. I don't know why that is, but
yeah, that's wiring for sure. I mean, I have a very high sense of smell, which is a curse and a blessing, because when it's stinky, it's like, and it could be a block away and I can smell it. Not sure. We'll have to in another time share some scents that you enjoy, because skunk is not one of mine.
oh, I love it. It could be my party piece. You know, people sort of bring in, you know, skunk and say, sniff that and tell us that you like it now. Well, moving swiftly on, my tipple here today is called a volatile and tonic.
Oh, what is that?
Well, I'm not quite sure, but I think the tonic is holding it in. By the look of this glass, it looks very maelstromy underneath the tonic, which just seems to be sitting on the top. So I don't know what would happen if I put a straw in and actually.
I was just thinking, is this a straw kind of thing? And I'm stepping away. Why don't you open it up over there?
I was thinking if I put my mouth over the other end of the straw, but it would probably come out my nose.
Oh, gross. Most definitely step away from the vehicle.
Be a sinus flush.
Neti pot or something, like, whoa.
It's the wonderful thing when therapists get together, because no extremes of bodily function are off the table.
Because anything can happen. Anything can happen.
And in the case of your pungent potion, it's very much on the table.
And in the air. Oh my goodness.
And you know, there are a number of people in the world who would come into this stench that we're currently inhaling and say it's beautifully fragrant like roses and a floral meadow. And you or I know that this is not the way to approach bad smells. Bad smells are bad smells, and when you acknowledge them as such.
Correct. And it also makes me think about how people can get accustomed to something that is not good.
Absolutely.
And think it is good.
Yes.
So that it's like a maladjustment almost of like, I'm doing good here. I'm just taking it in, rolling with it.
Thinking of a perfumery, when you're sniffing lots of different perfumes, they can blend, so they just become like one note. So very often on perfume counters, they get coffee
Yes.
in little tins, and you sniff that, and it
Yes,
resets
it
the
does.
senses.
I'm
And
very
sometimes
familiar with that.
we
Yeah,
need that reset. So
we
if
absolutely do.
if we're smelling one thing, whatever that one thing may be, we need a little bit of coffee. To snort some coffee, and then that resets everything, ready to go forward.
It's our natural reset button.
So, Linda, smelling beautiful roses when actually the place stinks of cack is an instance of toxic positivity.
Yes.
What is toxic positivity? Well, I'm so glad you asked. A fantastic example of toxic positivity, which comes from a Christian ethos, is a little anecdote about a woman that lives in a little village where there's a lot of rain. Must be in Britain somewhere. Who can say? During one particularly bad storm, the waters are rising and rising. So there's about a foot worth of water, and the lady is at her window looking out desperately to be saved. And a man comes past and says to the woman, "Look, I can carry you. I'll lift you on my back and I can take you to safety." And she looks him up and down, and then she replies, oh no, she says. It's my best old lady accent, apart from my normal voice. oh no, she says. I'm waiting for God to save me. And so the man walks on. Anyway, the waters keep rising and rising until they completely cover the ground floor of her house. So she has to go upstairs, and she's leaning out of her top floor window, and a person comes past in a boat, and the person in the boat says to the old lady, "Hop onto the boat and I will take you to safety." "Oh no," says the lady, "I'm waiting for God to save me." So the person in the boat rows on. Eventually, the floodwaters are so high that they completely cover the house, and so the woman is up on the roof, clutching onto the chimney, and some people come along in a helicopter, and they call down to the woman, "We'll throw down the ladder, you can climb up, and we will fly you to safety." "Oh no," says the lady, "I'm waiting for God to save me." So the helicopter flies off, and the waters rise and rise, they keep rising, and eventually the old lady drowns. And she goes to heaven, and she marches up to God and says, "Oi, God," definitely from Britain, "Oi, God, why didn't you come save me when I was drowning?" Well, says God. God's obviously Welsh in this analogy. "Listen here, Carriad. I sent you a good Samaritan, a boat, and an helicopter. What more did you want, you Jews?" And it's that ethos of life is continually presenting us with the answers, with the things that we need. But sometimes our positivity of something else blinds us to what's right in front of us. And sometimes we need to look at the situation that we're in and the suffering that we're in and acknowledge that before we can actually start to heal. So just denying it, shoving it down, saying, "No, that doesn't exist because I'm I'm perfectly well and my well-being is 100%. But when we do that, we're actually denying and stifling and suppressing all of the things that we do need to look at and to heal.
Right. We're denying the potential for growth.
Absolutely.
We're denying our own power within, and every opportunity gives us a chance to grow. And if we deny them, we become prisoners.
Yeah.
And people don't recognize that when you do this, you give away your freedom.
Certainly, yes.
And freedom is such a big thing. It's a topic of like heightened discussion everywhere, as it should be. However, the topics as they're discussed put us all in prison. Because we have this blind definition, a blind thought of, oh no, this is the resolution. This is how it's going to work out. And then you have God saying, well, what more do you want?
The subject of freedom, and immediately what comes to mind, which is incredibly relevant in society and across the world at the moment, which is freedom of speech, and the debate that goes on around freedom of speech. As for example, what is freedom of speech, and where does it buffer up against hate speech, and should we have freedom to spout hate in the world? And it is a very interesting conundrum. If your ideals and beliefs and doctrine are actually prisons that keep a person completely confined and locked in to that doctrine, when they speak from that, is that freedom of speech? Or is it actually imprisoned speech?
Correct. Yes. And I think it is definitely that. When you're in bondage, you're going to react and say whatever you unbalanced emotionally will say, because you don't even recognize that you're in a straitjacket and you're muzzled.
Yeah, absolutely. And very often those prisons come from our family, our community, the people that we are immersed within and entrusting relationships within. Modern studies on the ability to actually take on information show that people don't they don't learn through information. They don't really take information on. What they do is that they come to that information with bias given by their community, by their family, by people they're surrounded by, and they basically skew all of that information to fit it to what they believe. And so when we come to freedom of speech, very often people who are exercising their right to freedom of speech are actually speaking from a place which is completely confined.
Right.
There is no freedom in that place from which they're speaking from. And I think that is very often where we hear hate speech.
Yes. It's for those of us who are very sensitive, it's tough to be in that environment. And yet we as sensitives need to experience that, because not only can we as practitioners and teachers help others learn how to cope with that, we also can work in such a way that those that are blind to it will see a difference and hopefully make a change. It's all about awareness. It's all about acceptance and recognition of all. It's not just your tribe, but it's really we get stuck in this thought process of, I don't feel comfortable in this environment or these people or this thought process or this way of living. They're not my tribe. And we can potentially become a prisoner of our own making by retreating into the environment that we think is our tribe, when we in fact need to be exposed to all.
Absolutely.
In order to have a balanced approach.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
It is so much about freedom and liberation, but not in the way that people understand that definition.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, it is about honoring and respecting others regardless, regardless of where they're coming from. And that's uncomfortable. You know, nobody likes to be around somebody who's hateful, who spews hate. Nobody likes being around someone that's prejudiced in any shape or form, or very blatantly making you feel like you're an outsider.
Absolutely. And I think that's the key, because very often when people are united in hate, that actually feels very comforting for them. And they will speak with a common tongue in that hatred and united by it's when a person is made to feel like an outsider that the challenges for that person arise, because suddenly if they are an outsider, they don't want to be an outsider, they want to be included, and that's where they become united with haters by hate as well. So, you know, better to hate that thing, whatever that thing may be, and be included, rather than not hate that thing or stand up against hate and be excluded from that community.
Right.
So we can see how it self-perpetrates.
Yes, most definitely. And unfortunately, what we need to be always reminded of is separation's an illusion.
Yeah.
We are all connected. So to deny that existence is to deny your own existence.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
That makes your head explode, but but that's how I understand it.
Yeah. And there are a lot of parallels between freedom of speech and the act of saying what you feel into the world, or what you think into the world, and the experience of a Reiki modality treatment, in terms of when the practitioner is shut down to a particular expansiveness within the treatment, possibility, potential, and they're working from a very narrow doctrine or dogma, that actually creates an enclosing of the treatment and a ring fencing of the value of that treatment and what it can actually provide. There is an equivalency between freedom of speech and freedom of treatment in that respect. And this is something that I've noticed a lot of in the Reiki modality community. The idea of shutting things down and not listening to the truth of others,
Right.
because there is, particularly in the West, where we have in the Sui Reiki, we have this very defined history, and everything is built around that history. So even other modalities of Reiki therapy that have come from the experience of a Sui Reiki still work on the basis of a Sui Reiki. And people who say, actually, I don't want to partake in the Western Reiki, so I'm going to go back and research and visit Japan and train with other Asui Reiki masters, there is still this enclosure in all of those practices. Now, if that works for the practitioner, then absolutely, honoring their truth is very, very important. However, when we express a different truth to that, or we express our own truth in some way and we're shut down,
Right.
because that's not Reiki.
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, we've heard that, haven't we?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So there are many contrasting ways of approaching life and how we navigate life's experiences. Stoicism takes a realistic view of the world, with the insight that is to plan for reality. So no matter what challenges or joys happen, there is a plan for that, and it's taken in stride. The very different approach is that of faking it until you make it. So whatever your endeavor is, you fake it until you make it, acting as if it is, until it becomes as is. A crucial aspect of this process is absolute knowing of the result and buying into certain cognitive biases in order to achieve it. This and other positive thinking approaches work very well for many people. However, there is a point when the faking it part denies the reality of a person's life, and there is a disconnect between what's happening and what they believe is happening.
Wow, that totally fits into, fake emotions. We're only creating more fakeness. Where is the foundation? Where is the experience of life that helps us grow? If it's shallow, if it doesn't exist, if we don't acknowledge that it exists, how can we actually feel like we're moving forward? Fake it until you make it. My goodness, that is a coping mechanism that I've heard many, 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 many people say, and yet, where has it gotten them? What have, not only have they done to themselves, but how are they impacting others who hear that and wonder, do I fit in? Can I do that? I can't do that, or I can do that better. Where's the value? What value does that really truly add to an individual for growth?
Areas of toxic positivity create this environment where everything else has to be shut out. You have to believe the endeavor or intent, absolutely, because if you don't, you're punished for that. There's like this chiding that happens, which is like, well, you obviously didn't believe enough, or you doubted it, or you did something wrong. And I find that exceptionally not toxic.
It's toxic, and it also makes me think about how you're not given the freedom to actively participate in your own growth. If you don't do this, then all else fails. That's taking away our freedom to choose, to be able to find what we need to do as an individual to help us grow, rather than conform to something that is so rigid. No wonder people are struggling.
Yeah.
If you don't have the ability to be an adventurer, to step forward and say, I'm thinking this is the way to go because I'm allowing the full experience to help me decide, rather than someone else telling you, well, if you don't do this, it's because you're not measuring up to a certain standard that no one can measure up to.
Absolutely.
How sad is that?
Yeah, that's that perfection. And this oeuvre of perfection, which is often so integral to a toxic belief system.
Right. It's kind of painful just thinking about that.
Yes. And it transcends so many strata of society as well. It's not just about positivity, it's about so much in life. We think about things like the British stiff upper lip, what it is to be a good American.
Yes.
We are constantly bombarded by these ideas of what the archetype or perfect example of that is, and we have to aspire to it. And if we don't, then we're not a good
Yes.
person.
I was just thinking of I think it was Carl Jung that said, I'd rather be whole than good.
Yes.
That's tough for people to really understand what that means.
Oh, yeah. And there's so much about context in all of this as well. What is archetypally good in one context is archetypally bad in another.
Right.
But this idea of universal goodness or universal evil is so rigid and so perfect in its definition that to stray from that means that in any context it becomes good or bad, depending on what way you're looking. However, the reality of the world is that all of this is contextual. It's, depending on the context and the complexities of that context, different behaviors have different outcomes.
Right.
I think this is the thing in terms of Reiki modality treatment, where there is this idea of you just put the intent out there into the universe and then Reiki will make it happen. And it's, in some ways, it's a lovely sentiment. There is a beauty about this idea of this intelligent force that is knowledgeable and compassionate and benevolent enough to say, okay, yeah, I see what you want, I'll do that for you. But there's also something quite damaging in the acknowledgement that we don't play a part, that this is not a relationship with Reiki. It is an ordering service.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
They're the shop assistant that just says, oh, I'm looking for a pair of shoes in a size 13. Can I get that? Oh, yes, I'll just go and check in the stock room
I'll fetch that for you.
Whereas when we partake in that relationship, when we create this integral core relationship with Reiki, it becomes this mutual sharing of beyond ourselves, beyond life, beyond what we know. And there's something incredibly beautiful about that.
Yes. It's active participation. There are infinite possibilities, always. It is our human interaction that'll either skew it or, are we waiting to be served? It's a British sitcom. Or are we actively participating in creating, are we just sitting back, or are we designing each step we take? Are you being served is stuck in my head now.
I know, and mine too. I often see myself as the Mrs. Slocum of Reiki therapies because my hair color just changes so much.
Yes, it does.
Not natural, I have to say, but yeah, it's like
I've never correlated that before, but now I will.
Does that make you the Captain Peacock?
Oh God. No. I think I'd rather be
Mr. Humphreys.
Mr. Humphreys.
Are you free, Mr. Humphreys?
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Oh
It
dear.
just went down a crazy rabbit
I
hole.
was going to say, moving swiftly on before we go down a whole avenue we don't want to go down. In Reiki modalities and other forms of vibroenergetic treatment methods, it can be an enormous challenge that leads to practitioners doing their clients a grave disservice. The attitude of positivity becomes toxic when it fails to match the treatment depth with the client's needs. So, oh, your relationship is ending. Oh, I'll swipe right with Reiki to sort that out for you. You're in massive debt and you've lost your job, or Reiki will make that redundancy redundant. Oh, it's terminal. Oh, Reiki will have it undertaken within 21 days. Where is the value of removing pain from the treatment, in as much as your client is feeling pain? To dismiss it feels like you're failing to deal with it. It simply suppresses the pain so it can come back at a later date, or even worse, mutate into something that is, even more traumatic in the experiencing.
It is all about validation. And even if you can't empathize, have the compassion to embrace that person wherever they're at, and understand not to wave the magic wand, but to provide them with tools and consultation to be able to work through it, to be able to endure it, not get rid of it, to endure it, to embrace it, to understand it as this is your life experience. This is your now. This is part of who you are and part of your legacy to come. And how you handle yourself ultimately will impact how they handle themselves, which for every person they interact with afterwards will have that impact as well. It's not a one-to-one ever. It's always a one-to-multiple. And it's not to talk down those who practice in this way. It is to bring awareness that there is another way, a shift of perspective to be even more effective. How can I best help this person? Because ultimately, a lot of times practitioners who say, oh, don't worry, Reiki will take care of it, is their own limitation of understanding the power of it, and recognizing that it's within. So when we deny, we don't just deny to ourselves, we deny outwardly as well, which sets those limitations for everyone.
Absolutely. It's interesting how the brevity and temporary nature of a lot of Reiki modality training results in the term often used, which I'm not particularly fond of, but it works. It's called Mount Idiot, where when we stand on Mount Idiot, it means that we don't know much about a certain topic, and everything that we say just displays our lack of knowledge. I can think of a certain authority figure who talked about injecting oneself with bleach as a cure for COVID. That's Mount Idiot, firmly feet planted on summit of. The more we know, the longer we immerse ourselves in the growth of experience and learning of knowledge, the more we know there is to know.
Right.
And my particular journey, and I know yours as well, Linda, through Reiki modalities, has created this ever expanding balloon where the surface area becomes more and more spacious and greater in measurement, so that the more we learn, the more we know there is to learn. And it's the point now where it's like there's just how many lifetimes? There are not enough lifetimes to learn all there is to know about the experiences of Reiki. It's that thing of just enjoying the journey and not needing to prove anything, or not needing to deny other people's experiences, because there's just so much, to partake in. In Usui Reiki, the training is just the beginning. You do your training, you get that qualification, but that is just in many ways giving you a first foot in a lifelong journey.
Absolutely.
And I think because that isn't stressed enough, many people just take that day, 2 days, 3 days, however long they have done their training, and that they say, this is all there is to know.
Right.
If it isn't in that 2 or 3 day training, if it's not in that retreat,
then it doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. If the course materials do not cover this, then that is not Reiki. And the phrase, that is not Reiki, is one of the most damaging phrases
That
in the
just
Reiki
makes
community.
me cringe. Yes, it makes me cringe.
The founding principle of Reiki as a force is that it is omnipresent. It is in the fabric of the universe and imbues all things. To say that is not Reiki is suggesting that there is somewhere in the universe that is not Reiki. And that diminishes this idea of omnipresence and omnipotence. And so you create psychological blocks to your methodology and to your treatment ability. Because if there is one area that is not Reiki, one thing that does not consist of and is not imbued by Reiki, then there can be many things. And therein lies the immense challenge.
There's a reason why we're called practitioners. Practice, experience. When you're practicing, you're not there yet.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly. And even in terms of mastery, Reiki modality masters, we never master Reiki. That's not what's happening there. We master, in many ways, our ability to understand how we relate to Reiki. And that mastery is always within oneself, and how one conducts oneself in the approach to the mysterious environment.
We master what we practice.
Yeah.
you know?
real world value, which is sort of the other side. It's the polar of toxic positivity, which is the offering of real world value. Because without real world value, the essential core of treatment or a treatment regime, it cannot relate to the cause, what you're aiming to actually resolve within that treatment. So it becomes this magic wand or sort of sleight of hand position. um, and it becomes like pulling a rabbit out of a hat. It's so easily undermined by skepticism, whether it be the clients or those around them, such as family and friends. So, a family member says, oh, that's all nonsense. I think when there is sleight of hand going on, it's very easy to actually give in to that skepticism. When you endeavor for real world value or three-dimensional value, it ensures that you match the client's dis-ease, their pain and suffering, in a very tangible way, because you are treating the depth of the dis-ease, the scope of how that dis-ease impacts them and their life, and you seek long-lasting results. So it's not the practitioner waving hand and letting Reiki do its thing, because Reiki's already doing its thing. The client simply hasn't realized that they can access that experience, that where Reiki is doing what it needs to do, because sometimes the practitioner is being so positive in their looking elsewhere to sort of say, Reiki will do its thing, that the client has just sort of wandered off and isn't really sort of on the same page as the practitioner.
Right. You're making me think about another project that I'm working on, and it's a value endeavor that I have with regard to my life, what I'm doing within the podcast, within the One Therapy community, and I think it's important for those listening that it's important to be able to be flexible with what you consider to be your value that you want to impart to your clients. But as you're talking, I'm just thinking, like, that's my value endeavor that he's talking about. Oh, how nice. And
share it now.
and this really keeps me in check, not just for the benefit of my clients or my students, but it also keeps me in check to be sure that I am meeting them at the value level that they need. Basically, it's a simple statement: decide to be more discriminating and more mindful of your choices. Recognizing your power within and your life will change fundamentally, satisfyingly, and profoundly significantly, which will result in long-lasting holistic balance of mind, body, and spirit. If we keep that in mind, we will constantly be actively participating. It isn't a matter of like, okay, I'm going to sit back and be in nice, comfy, and the beautiful music and the atmosphere of the room is just wonderful as I get this treatment, as I place my order and it's delivered on a platter. No, it's active participation. It's not passive. And as a practitioner and trainer, it's a big responsibility. We each possess that, should have that responsibility and acknowledge that responsibility. But from a practitioner and master trainer, that's critical, to constantly be prepared to adjust and shift your perspective to meet the needs of others.
Yeah. It's why in karmic regression therapy, funnily enough, there is this mutual participation. It's not a question as a practitioner of just telling your client they had syphilis. they have to want to partake in their syphilis. You have to do that together. It's mutual syphilis.
Oh, joy.
But that is the experience of doing a KRT treatment, and just sharing what you're experiencing, and then the client coming back and adding to that narrative and that story, and then you take that and you run with it, and then they come back, and there is this, it is like a conversation.
It's a mutual interaction for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely, yeah. And sometimes things are so weird and wonderful, they get so wacky in a KRT treatment, where you're trying to understand what this enormous wooden thing in the environment is, and finding out through that conversation and through the shared experience of what's coming through the treatment, that this is some medieval torture device.
Yeah.
It's so easy to, in your own biases as a practitioner, to be shutting things down all the time, but that mutual interaction with your client, it just opens things up all the time. So the possibility in treatment just exponentially expands, which I find wonderful. It's one of my favorite forms of treatment.
Absolutely. It's like getting a book that you can't put down.
Yeah.
And you'll go without sleep just just to keep going.
And those treatments are very much like that. It's so responsive and so relationship building, so trust building.
Yes.
And very often, even when the paths diverge in a treatment, and there are two different tracks going on, there is still this constant refinement of course, and coming back together again, and sort of coming back onto the same page, which just enables a whole plethora of experiences to happen.
Right. It enriches the relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. It's really vital in not just KRT treatments, but any treatment, to really see the client where they are, not to be approaching that as this is what I think they should be, or I think they should be doing, but to truly see them. And I see you is so important, because it's not just about the face and the person you think they are, it's about all that they are. And as a practitioner, you are on a journey to discover the experience of your client, because only then can you know how to impact their lives in benevolent and compassionate ways that truly mean something,
that are impactful and effective. You're bringing up the ICU, and that just brings me back to early days of Celtic Reiki and the story you relayed of the South African tribe and their core value of recognizing others, and truly I see you, meaning I and everyone around, including your ancestors, acknowledge who you are. And the response is, yes, I am seen. I, we, and all my ancestors. So it's such a connection of mutual oneness that plays its way through all of the training that I've ever been through. And it's such a comfort, to recognize someone in all of their oneness, all of their who they are. That too helps you in your treatment approach and how you view others. Much more effective, and I think with much more feeling. So much of this is about, when we talk about toxic positivity, it's about compartmentalizing feelings or denying them or not validating that they're there. And we are saying, now throw that out the window. You've got to embrace good, bad, or indifferent. You've got to embrace it all in order to truly understand who you are, before you can even understand who the next person is, who your client is, who your family member is, or whomever you are interacting with. It's critical.
Absolutely. Just hearing you speak there, Linda, for a moment, the thing that really comes to mind here for me personally is the experience of living my life with an eating disorder. I can't remember a time in my life when food and the consumption of was not an issue for everybody around me. apart from me, I quite enjoyed it. So for me, food was my comfort. It was my go-to. And during very challenging circumstances and difficult circumstances, the dopamine hit of eating something was a way of feeling better. And perhaps negating some of the neurochemistry from quite severe trauma. But it became such a problem for the other people around me, caregivers, etc., that very soon, whilst I was still in single digits in age, I was taken to a doctor and nutritionalists and told, that I had to stick to this eating plan and this diet plan and calories. And if you like sweet tea, use this artificial sweetener in place of sugar. And very early on in my life, there was this indoctrination into how I relate to the experience of eating. I developed anorexia very, very quickly after that. When I was in my early teens, I was diagnosed with anorexia and would have long periods where I just wouldn't eat because of that. And throughout my life, there have been this relationship not only with eating, but with the eating disorder and how I navigate that. So decades long complexity around relationships with food, relationships with navigating an eating disorder, and relationships with other people, to the point now where if people say to me, "Oh, you look really good, you've lost weight," that has a very decades long visceral reaction with me, because it's like they like me more because I'm thinner.
Yes.
So when I go to the doctor and they say, "Oh, you could do with losing a little bit of weight, maybe some gentle exercise," I find that completely negates all of those years of experience, lived experience, real world experience of all of the complexity. It's not as simple as that. This is what I find with the ICU, is when a practitioner truly sees their client, it creates a relationship where the complexity of life and everything in life is truly honored. And they're not just dismissing that client with a platitude or a positive affirmation. They're not waving a magic wand and saying, "Oh, it's all right, this'll all be fine, just eat a little bit less, go jogging, that'll pep you up." Lived in experience cannot be matched with platitude and wand waving.
Right. Just hearing you tell this story, it just reaffirms the approach of seeing beyond the surface, understanding and embracing what's the underlying core of that individual and the potential. And it doesn't include external. The external comes, of course, it's the physical manifestation of who we are. However, it's so important to embrace all of who you are. Because when we only acknowledge what we think we know and what we think we see, we are limiting ourselves and limiting the individual. How can we help if we don't truly embrace unlimited potential?
Absolutely, yes. I have a real sense of humor around my personal eating disorder, and I think it's something that is a lifelong endeavor. It's being sober. It's never, "Oh, I don't have that eating disorder anymore." It is a lifelong journey. But I have a real sense of humor around it in so many ways. The thing of being able to walk into a room and saying, "I know what you're thinking," anorexic, because it's not what you think of when you look at me, and I know that. But there is this sort of real sense as well of the gift of living that experience, because it enables me to draw upon such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to how people relate to food, to nutrition, to exercise habits, to how they relate to people in terms of what they look like, body dysmorphia. All of these things are all there at my fingertips in some form
Right.
when I access my own experience. And that enables me to really empathize with people, not just in a sympathetic way of, oh, I'm so sorry, but being able to give real world insight, not just through telling people, oh, well, I understand you, or I see you, but also being able to be open and receptive to their experiences. And I think this is the real power of empathy and the real world value of coming from a place of experience, is that it does open you up to the experiences of others, even when they're contrasting or even conflicting, because you can have that ambivalence, that conflicting emotion, that conflicting experience, and be able to hold it. That's the gift it gives, where you don't have to invalidate someone else's experience of the world to be absolutely empowered in your own experience of the world.
Right. Right. Again, so important to embrace all of your emotion and feelings that come to the surface.
Yeah.
Because if we just did that every single day, yeah, it would be tough in the beginning, because if you're not accustomed to doing that, it would be culture shock. Because when you allow that floodgate to open and you're not accustomed to it, for whatever conditioning or coping you have had through your life, it's going to be tough. But I know the more you do choose, actively choose to embrace all of who you are, there is nothing but benefit from it. And it's not easy. So if anyone listening thinks, oh, this is just going to be a flip of the switch, nope. You have to be committed to yourself in your healing journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
And glean from it whatever you can to benefit your healing journey as well as others.
Yeah.
Because everything has that opportunity to be able to turn it into something that can be expansive and provide growth.
Yes. It's powerful in terms of not just within the context of eating disorders, but in so many contexts of life where challenges and lived in experiences do create this seemingly erratic or capricious behavior in people, where sometimes they will act completely against the expectation, or they will make light of something that actually is incredibly hurtful or painful for them, but they make light of it as a way of creating community around it, making people laugh,
Right.
so that the suffering is turned into laughter and into happiness in some way. But also being respectful of that in somebody else. Just because they're behaving in a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that that's how they're feeling underneath. And it's really important as practitioners and as trainers as well to acknowledge that what you see is not always what is really happening.
Right.
And this is something that in the therapy community, and particularly sort of the Reiki modality community, that dismissal of a person's complexity is something that is so challenging, because it's not until you really partake in the real world value that you're offering that you really know what to ask for, and you really know what to endeavor for in that treatment. You need to match the complexity of the treatment with the complexity of the person.
Absolutely. It's a deep commitment. We're in a environment, in a world that everything is superficial and there's no depth. Ask anyone if they present some information to you and it sparks an interest in you, and you ask for more information that requires a very in-depth explanation. I'd be curious to know how many people actually come back with great depth of information. Now, I know you do, because that's just how you're wired. But I've recently encountered this where something interesting or fascinating has caught my attention, and I feel like there's a connection with that person. Like, oh, this is fascinating information. I'd love to hear more. So, tell me more. What does this really entail? What is the history? Or think of any open-ended questions you can think of. That's what pours out of me. And this shocking experience was I got deer in the headlights look. And the response was, I don't know. And I thought, whoa, why is there no depth? And I think that's kind of a pandemic in and of itself. There's no depth of not only feeling, but depth of inquisitiveness. There's no curious minds that want to know the whys, the whats, the hows, which lends itself to why I think we have so much toxic positivity. Because if you just say this, it's a blanket statement, it shuts that switch right off, and you can move on to the next quick, immediate gratification scenario.
It's being able to hold pain, suffering, trauma, the not so nice stuff, without becoming completely swamped in it, but being able to hold it in such a way that you can facilitate treatment within that environment, and be able to sort of hold it in a context which isn't necessarily traumatic, to be able to hold suffering without feeling suffering. Maybe being able to hold suffering and having a sense of humor around it, and being able to look at it in that more humorous way when we can experience things in life from an enormous depth that we can actually, in the slightest of actions or the most minute behavior, can actually reflect that level of depth within it. So 10 seconds of experience can actually be unpacked over many, many lifetimes. And every interaction we have is doing that by understanding and truly seeing, listening to the person that you're interacting with. They are constantly telegraphing years worth of experience in everything that they say.
If you listen rather than just hear, when you listen, there's the depth.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are all capable of hearing, some better than others. but it is in the listening that we gain the depth of understanding.
Yeah, exactly. What is so fascinating about this is, when we are younger, the young brain can take a lot of scope. It is wired to have new experiences.
That's the
so
learning.
This
that's the learning practice.
Yeah. Absolutely. So this and this and this and this and this, and they get bored really easily. As we get older, our brains begin to rewire. So we're not as interested in new experiences. We are more interested in understanding the experiences we've had at a deeper level. So we take that same amount of capacity and we flip it 90 degrees. So rather than wide, it's deep.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge is that in a society that is often dominated by younger brains, that can make an older person feel inadequate, because there's so much going on and it's all surface layer. There's no depth to it.
Right.
So rather than fixing on one thing and going deeper and deeper and deeper, the older person often feels that it's all too loud, too overwhelming, too much, because they're not given the opportunity of exploring depth within things. Depth it comes with age.
Right.
And this is the thing where younger brains and older brains differ, in as much as you can go into real depth with an older brain. And older brains speak with depth. They communicate with depth. The challenge is that particularly in our technologically Twitter-based world, where we are limited by the amount of characters that we can have and very, very short attention spans, that depth is lost.
Right.
And in many ways, there is this encouragement of older people and older brains to be more like younger brains, to be more open to experiences, to be more open to the new. However, this relationship is twofold. What about younger brains
Having more
flipping that
Yeah.
depth so that it becomes scope to them, and that they can explore the scope of depth within older voices to a point where they really begin to understand more about the wisdom that is there to be shared by
Right.
older brains.
Right. It is once again you're illustrating balance, not extremes. It is how it is right at the moment, but each individual, regardless of age, has a responsibility. And are you going to invest your breath, or are you just going to spend it, just waste it? I choose the investment aspect because we all win. Who doesn't want to have the win-win scenario happen?
Yeah. Because the other side of the real world value debate is how our therapy is diminished as placebo. So a lot of people who would understand themselves as real world experiencers, they believe in what they can touch and feel, and anything beyond that is not real. They find it very easy to dismiss the healing response. They belittle the ethos instantly, denying very real world results as foolish. If you're healed, you're healed, placebo or not, it doesn't matter. And I think that's the takeaway for me. However, when the pseudoscientist shouts pseudoscience, because it usually is those who do that, it's usually people who call others pseudoscientific, who are pseudoscientific in their one article research themselves, or hearsay. I've heard that Reiki is placebo, so therefore I'm going to call it pseudoscience, without actually taking decades of my life to really research and to get on the ground experiences and real world data about this. I'm just going to say it's pseudoscience because that immediately takes the wind out of the sails and immediately collapses the argument for a pseudoscientist.
Correct. I was just going to say, for them.
For them, yes, exactly. Because in that respect, the one article that they've read or the hearsay that they've heard validates their ability to call it pseudoscience. But that is the very nature of pseudoscience. I want to fit what I believe, my real world. If I can't see it and touch it, then it's not real. I want to fit that ethos to the results. And that is the very definition of pseudoscience there. So when they do that, they can very often make a client feel less than, or they give them the opportunity to feel less than because I'm foolish in some way because I got better. And actually I shouldn't have got better because it's a pseudoscience, because it's placebo, because no one should ever be made to feel less than.
No.
Because in many ways, they were the ones who were courageous enough to trust their Reiki modality healer, to trust an intangible, unseeable, unknowable force, and to believe in their own body and mind's ability to heal.
Right.
And that is bravery. That's real bravery. Absolutely. And we owe it to our clients to acknowledge that bravery in how we approach our treatment processes with our sights on real world value. And that's how we serve them. Rather than the ego of, look what I can do, when I wave my hands and you feel hot and buzzy. It's not about that. It's not about what you can do. It's always about being in service to others. Even in VM, where it's all about self-treatment, that self-treatment is conducted to the service of others and to ensure a benevolent outcome for others.
Right. It's hurtful when, whatever your experience is invalid to that person. When they cancel you out, when they don't validate who you are, that's traumatic in and of itself.
Mm.
Whatever happened to celebrating people's successes, whatever they may entail?
Yeah.
And obviously from a healing perspective, that's a great success. When you are given an opportunity to experience a Reiki treatment and the healing process that in turn not only healed perhaps the physical ailment, but healed you in such great depth that you feel renewed and completely shift a perspective in how you treat life, your life and others. What a great celebration. And to say, oh, it's not real, the pain that I feel just hearing you tell that story and me regurgitating it, that's a painful, ultimately mean way to treat someone. It just makes me wonder, like, is that the self-talk that these pseudoscience minded people have of themselves, that you're limited, you're invalidated, unless it's been documented, or unless you've read it, or unless you've heard it from someone else? I mean, they're not, it's not an us and them. I don't want to emphasize us and them because that's an illusion, but it's disturbing to me to hear it. But that is the reality, though. That's just it. That is the reality of the now.
It's so easy to invalidate the experiences of others, and it is something that we all do. It's part of human nature that we will not see the 50, 60, 70, 20 years worth of experience behind the eyes, the variety of experience, things that other people have experienced that we can never know, but we don't see that. What we see is that immediate statement they've made,
Right.
the thing that they've said, the phrase, and we respond to that and we react to that. And very often somebody's statements have that level of depth where if we just listened different, we would hear it, maybe in their tonality and their cadence, or how they say it compared to how they would normally say something. And when we miss it, we respond to that without acknowledgement of who they truly are.
Right.
So when somebody says they're in pain, a loved one might turn around and say, well, what have you got to be in pain about? Could be worse. So very often young people who are in a place in the world where they are learning new experiences but don't necessarily have the depth of experience to be able to handle those experiences, it's very easy for an older person or an older brain to turn around and say, well,
suck it up, buttercup.
Suck it up, It's like, but that for a younger brain can be completely overwhelming, where they are literally lost without orientation or ability to find their way home.
Right.
And that's where we see young people who are in really dark places and feel utter shame and are completely bereft of what to do and how to progress. They cannot see a way forward in life. And one of the phenomena that I've seen many, many, many times in terms of the experience of young people and older people as well is the association with facets of oneself being seen as the whole person. And this is where we do it to ourselves, where we don't acknowledge our own self and all that we are and all of the complexity that we are. We take that one momentary experience of suffering and pain and not knowing what to do, and we are taught to believe that that's all of us. This is how I feel. So
this is who I am.
This is who I am. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, bunnies.
Yep.
And the idea of one part of us that cannot see a way forward gets translated to I, as a person, cannot see a way forward. So when that facet comes up, and we know this in terms of the practitionership and treating people, that facets come up and they need to be released, let go of. And those parts bubble up and in treatment they just go. Sometimes in the EAP, the energy alignment process, after, things will bubble up and come to the surface, and we just let them go. We just say, no, I know what this is. This is coming up to sort of
Right.
go off.
It no longer serves me.
It no longer serves me, and no longer needs to be there. So it just comes up, I acknowledge it, thank it for its service, and it goes. However, we are taught in society not only to grab hold of that facet that's coming up to the surface and treat it like it's like everything that we are and our entire experience of the world, but we are taught to believe that that is us, that somehow it gets associated with the ego of the self. And in that moment, rather than letting that part of us die and thanking it for its service, people are actually inspired to act, to end themselves, and to take the process of that one little aspect of themselves and treat it as a universal in terms of themselves as a human being.
Right.
And that's where this is incredibly challenging, when it comes to actually not only acknowledging the complexity of other people, but to acknowledge the complexity of ourselves.
Right. And again, it's that commitment. It's a moment by moment process. You don't go on vacation from that.
No, exactly. In terms of toxic positivity and the experience of that versus real world value, and how that can be something that we really aspire to in terms of the offering that we give, and the offering that we experience in the world, real world value, and how that can very easily be subverted into a lack of real world value, or a dismissal of the real world through toxic positivity. The balancing force between this, and Reiki is a balancing force. That's the action of Reiki when applied in treatment. It balances. When we balance real world value with an optimistic outcome, we strive for tangible, real world, three-dimensional ways to achieve that outcome. We bring into our awareness factors that may stunt or diminish treatment results, and we overcome our own biases and go to work on our clients' cognitive dissonance between their current state of dis-ease and a state of lived stability. And so the approach that I take in terms of treatment and training and everything that I do is moving away from the polarizing influences between, for example, dis-ease and ease, beyond the healing response and pseudoscientific naysayers, between real world value and an egocentric power trip. Somewhere in a balanced form of all of those things is a reality, a lived reality that enables us to be very optimistic, some would say positive, but in a very real world way. And those two things create a stabilizing influence. We're not running in one direction or the other. We are integrating them into this experience that creates a steady path through life, and ways that we're not looking at the extremes, at polarizing against other people, etc., but living in this place of pivot and balance in the middle.
Yeah, it's about constantly adjusting. When you think of the actual physical balancing, you're engaged. You're never relaxed. And I don't mean that as, you got to be intense all the time, but your awareness is always alert, ready, looking for signals and triggers. And I mean, it's a full body experience, and being able to first interact with yourself, but then be able to better interact with others. Once you recognize it's not about surface. It's not about what you see. It's full body experience, meaning the visual, the sensory, and all the senses that come into play that so many deny even exist. But it's by that constant awareness and alertness that you can live and have that stability. I keep thinking this is a lot of work, however, isn't it like any other kind of physical conditioning? In the beginning it really is tough, but once you practice, once you get into the awareness of what that outcome will result in,
Yeah.
it gets second nature. It becomes part of
Absolutely.
it is who you are, but
Yeah.
it's like reintroducing yourself to who you are
Yeah.
and being able to say, I got this.
Yeah.
I got this.
Definitely. It's like being on a Bosu board or a surfboard, in as much as, the first time you do it, you're liable to fall off
You are
because
going to fall off.
yeah, you are going to fall off because it's this sense of either being completely rigid and trying to hold yourself rigid,
Yeah.
which is like real world value, that
Yeah.
sort of thing of real world, very tangible, very physical, very rigid, versus the toxic positivity, which is an extreme movement. So if you overcompensate and you move in a particular direction in an extreme way, you're going to fall off.
You're going down.
Exactly. So on a surfboard, rigidity or overextended movement in a certain direction will cause you to fall off.
Yeah.
However, over time, as you get used to those fine, nuanced movements, in core strength becomes more used and you become used to actually engaging your core and it becomes stronger. It's micro movements. So it's not sort of a rigidly held, everything locked. It's these small movements in different directions that compensate with the waves around you. And as the ocean moves and creates these slight movements beneath you, you move in response to that very slight movements. And it creates a very strong stability. And in many ways, sort of that lived stability in terms of treatments, lived stability is the receptacle that those treatments live in. Whether that's Reiki or vibroenergetics or anything in life, we develop this core strength that enables us to make those micro movements in response to the life around us. And as life happens, we respond, not by holding ourselves rigid against it, and not by making extreme movements towards positivity, stroke negativity,
Right.
or any other sort of extreme direction that we head off in.
What we're talking about is toxic positivity, but it's all about reintroducing yourself to your whole self.
Yes.
To all of who you are.
Yeah.
In its fullest potential.
Yeah.
Knowing that it's already there and allowing for those things that no longer serve you to go.
Yeah.
And that's not waving a magic wand. It is releasing yourself from that prison, liberating yourself, and recognizing that there are other possibilities that you will need to actively choose. But when you release yourself and you get rid of those rocks out of your backpack, we're going back to Twisted Vine, but when you lighten yourself and open yourself, you're able to take in more discriminatingly things that will serve you and others in a way that is much more holistic.
Yes.
So it is not mind, it is not body, it is not spirit, it is all, and embracing all of who you are.
Yeah.
It's a learning experience because so many of us have forgotten what that means.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're taught hierarchy from the moment that we're born and we begin to learn. We are taught hierarchy, how one thing is more important or less important than something else, how there are people who are more important or less important than ourselves, how certain things in life and certain attainments in life are more important than others. So we create this complex system of hierarchy within our internal experience of the world. But actually, and this is very important in terms of Reiki therapy, Reiki therapies are based on holarchy, where there is this acceptance and understanding that all things are equal and in balance. And it is by balancing all things that we actually create this immense sense of well-being and success in life. Because whilst we are creating hierarchy, we are always going to be less than on that hierarchy. No matter how much we are more than, there will be areas where we are less
There'll always
than.
be, yes, there'll always be the opposite.
Yeah, absolutely. There'll always be that polarity.
Yes.
Whereas when you balance everything in life and you honor everything in your life, that creates a sense of balance and harmony within your life that is then much easier to treat by those small movements. So when you apply the Reiki experience, it's little movements rather than big extreme movements or rigidity of sitting firmly where you are. So holarchy is so important when it comes to Reiki therapies, but also as an ethos for life, understanding that when something comes up, a character trait, maybe a life experience that is a lifelong experience rather than something that you overcome, honoring that as part of the holarchy and understanding that it's equally as important as part of you as a human being as all the other parts, that enables it to take its place, where it doesn't have to scream and shout and gain acknowledgement by throwing Teddy out of pram. It can sit serene in its own acknowledgement and in its own acceptance. And by you honoring that, it can serve you, and you give it permission to serve you rather than torment you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I'll take the serving. Thank you.
Unless, of course, torment is part of your holarchy, and then bring it on.
Yeah. I mean, I actually was thinking like, okay, you're into torment too, so.
Isn't it wonderful to acknowledge that? Oh yeah, a little bit of torment. serve me.
Oh my
On the
goodness.
menu for today, a little bit of light torment. Moose bouche.
Oh, joy.
Oh yes, torment my tongue for a moment.
There we go again.
This idea of very often in life, there are things that happen that break us. It could be a slight crack, or it could be like a full-on shattering.
Right.
There is a tradition in Japan known as kintsugi, which is when a pot or piece of pottery gets broken, that there is this very ritualistic mending of the pot using a very specialized gold resin.
Yes.
And that sense of healing the pot very clearly demonstrates the journey of that pot or that pottery. So rather than in Western terms where we try and conceal the crack
Or chuck it.
or chuck it,
Yeah.
either throw it away or make it look like it was never broken, make it like new.
Right.
In this process of kintsugi, it is taking this broken piece of pottery
And honoring it.
celebrating the breakage,
Yes.
making it part of the journey and honoring it. And this is so powerful in terms of therapy, where when somebody is chipped, cracked, or completely and utterly broken into smithereens, creating this kintsugi using gold resin to seal those cracks, to put the whole back together again in a way that celebrates the trauma and the breakage, that elevates it and says, look, this is making me more beautiful than I was when I was pristine.
Yeah.
That's something that is so powerful. And whether it be, abuse, trauma, just life happening, grief, death, loss, relationships, whatever the source of that breakage within your life, rather than getting the dustpan and brush out and sweeping it off and chucking it away, rather than trying to fix it so that those breakages can't be seen, celebrating that breakage with gold resin, shiny, look at me.
I am here.
I'm here. Yeah. I was going to say something else there, but I shall restrain myself. My lips are. Yeah, but shouting at the world, this is part of who I am.
Yeah.
And I got broken and I healed using this most beautiful, sparkly, glittery resin that elevates those scars and those wounds.
And strengthens me.
Strengthens them. Yeah. And also keeps you safe in the knowledge that whatever breaks, chips, cracks happen in the future, that you will celebrate those as well.
Right.
You're not going to just throw yourself away because of a world that essentially doesn't quite see you in the way that you are. Yeah. It's been another epic here at the tavern.
It has been. It keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper. I hope I hope I don't see people coming in with life jackets on.
It's all very meta. Very meta.
That sounds so weird.
One day I should challenge myself to do a whole podcast in an American accent.
Oh, don't do it.
Oh no, I want to.
No, please, no. It will embed in my memory banks and I'll be damaged for life.
There'll be a little translation voice in your head that translates everything I say into a little whiny voice.
Oh, no. Don't do it.
It's been lovely seeing you again today, Linda. And
yes, it's been another wonderful meet and greet,
yes,
as usual.
Wonderful. So until next time that we meet again, Linda.
Yes. Be enchanted.
You've been listening to the It's Reiki But Not As You Know It podcast, hosted by Martin Pentecost, originator of One Therapy, and Linda Hadzinski, guide and companion to the One Therapy community. Find out more and join in the conversation at onetherapy.com. one-therapy.com. It's Reiki, but not as you know it.